In just 300 short years, Europe didn't just change, it was completely reborn. It was a period that tore down the old world and built a new one right on top of it, totally flipping the script on how people saw themselves, their world, and their place in the universe. So let's dive in and trace this incredible chain reaction of ideas to see exactly how it set the stage for, well, us.
Which brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did that happen? How did a society that was so rooted in obedience and tradition suddenly become this hotbed of revolution and discovery? Well, it wasn't just one single event. Think of it more like a series of intellectual dominoes, each one tipping over the next, creating this massive cascade of change that would redefine Western civilization forever.
Okay, so to really get how huge this transformation was, we have to first picture the world that came before it. So imagine late medieval Europe. It's a world where your place in society is decided the moment you're born, and the Catholic Church basically holds the keys to everything, both here on Earth and in the afterlife. It was super rigid, very hierarchical, but beneath the surface, the foundations were definitely starting to crack.
What this all meant was that the old order was kind of losing its grip. The whole feudal system was crumbling. The Church's absolute authority, it had been seriously shaken by the Crusades, and you had these new universities popping up, becoming these amazing centers for learning that were outside of strict religious control. And at the exact same time, all this incredible knowledge from the advanced Islamic world was flowing into Europe. It was basically the perfect fertile ground for new ideas to take root.
And that's something new? Well, that was the Renaissance. This was the very first domino to fall. Now, it all started as a rebirth of classical Greek and Roman ideas, but it very quickly became something way more profound. It sparked this revolutionary shift in focus, away from God and the afterlife and straight onto humanity and our lives right here, right now, on Earth.
The real engine driving all of this change was an idea called humanism. And honestly, it's hard to overstate just how radical this was at the time. I mean, for centuries, life was seen as just this short little prelude to the afterlife. Humanism completely turned that on its head. It basically declared that this life matters, that human potential is something incredible, something to be celebrated, and that independent thought, well, that's our greatest tool.
And this chart really just lays it all out there. In the medieval world, truth was something you were told by the church, period. Your whole goal was salvation. But during the Renaissance, truth became something you could discover for yourself, through reason and asking questions. The individual went from being this sort of nameless cog in a divine plan to being the star of their own story.
This new human-centered way of thinking just ignited a cultural explosion. Literature went from religious texts in Latin to Shakespeare's deeply human plays in English. Art transformed from these flat, divine figures to Da Vinci's breathtakingly realistic portraits. And those giant Gothic cathedrals, the ones designed to make you feel tiny before God, they gave way to this balanced, human-scaled architecture that celebrated human ingenuity.
But this newfound confidence in human reason, it couldn't just stay inside art galleries and libraries. Nope. It was on a direct collision course with the one institution that had held a monopoly on truth for 1,000 years, the Roman Catholic Church. That first domino was starting to wobble, and it was about to topple the next.
And that collision brings us to the Reformation. I mean, think about it. If people could use their own reason to create masterpieces of art, why couldn't they use it to examine their own faith? The Reformation was pretty much the inevitable result of that Renaissance spirit of inquiry being pointed right at the church itself, asking questions that, for a long time, nobody dared to ask.
The spark that really lit the fuse was a practice that, to a lot of people, just screamed corruption, the selling of indulgences. The idea was simple. You could pay the church money to get forgiveness for your sins. It started to look a whole lot less like a path to salvation and a whole lot more like a celestial fundraising scheme.
And then along comes Martin Luther. In 1517, this German priest nails his 95 Theses to a church door, which was a direct, public challenge to the church's authority. His main point was devastatingly simple. Salvation is between you and God. The Pope, he argued, has absolutely no power to sell it.
And this is where technology basically poured gasoline on the fire. Thanks to the recently invented printing press, Luther's theses were translated and just mass-produced. For the first time ever, a revolutionary idea could completely bypass the authorities and speak directly to the people. It went viral, 16th century style. It splintered Christianity, gave birth to Protestantism, and the age of unquestioned religious unity was officially over. But this was so much more than a religious split. It was a psychological earthquake. The Reformation proved that the single most powerful institution in Europe could be successfully challenged by an idea. And that begged a thrilling but also kind of terrifying question. If the church could be wrong about God, could it also be wrong about the heavens?
And asking that question, well, that's what kicks over our third and final domino, the scientific revolution. That same spirit of rational inquiry, the one the Renaissance applied to humanity and the Reformation applied to God, was now turned outward, to the huge silent universe itself. So the main event here was this epic showdown over the very structure of the cosmos. For centuries, church doctrine said that a stationary Earth was the center of God's creation. But a new theory, based on math and observation, proposed something radical, something heretical. What if the Earth was just another planet orbiting the sun? And you gotta understand, this wasn't just some nerdy academic debate. It was a profound challenge to humanity's very place in the universe.
What started with Copernicus became an absolute intellectual firestorm. You had Kepler figuring out the elegant laws of how planets move. Then Galileo points his telescope to the sky and comes back with proof. And it all culminates with the genius, Isaac Newton, who lays out the fundamental laws of motion and gravity. All of a sudden, the universe wasn't some divine mystery anymore. It was this grand, intricate clockwork that could be understood through reason.
So, when the dust finally settled from this incredible triple whammy of revolutions, what were we left with? Well, the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the scientific revolution all worked together to completely remake the European mind. And in doing so, they laid the very foundations for the world we all live in today. The impact of this whole chain reaction was just massive. It freed people from the idea that you had to blindly obey authority. It championed reason and observation as the best ways to find truth. It started the long and kind of messy process of separating church and state, and it planted the seeds for, everything we value today: individual liberty, democracy, and of course, all of modern science and technology.
And that really leaves us with one final, powerful thought. All of this incredible change, from Michelangelo's art to Newton's physics, it all came from one core shift. It's the answer to that question we started with, and it's a revolution that is still shaping our world. What happens when we decide that the ultimate authority for truth doesn't lie in some outside power, but within the boundless potential of the human mind itself?